Hey guys, tonight we're rolling back the stone tablet of history for a story that truly deserves to be carved in hieroglyphs on your living room wall. How the ancient Egyptians invented the world's first anti-hangover necklace. Yes, really. A wearable solution for waking up next to an open, canopic jar, wishing you hadn't challenged Kefren to that fourth jug of date wine. Before we wade into the Nile of nonsense, hit that like button and subscribe. If, and only if, you actually enjoy drifting through time with me. Drop a comment with the weirdest hangover cure you've ever tried. Or maybe just the one that failed spectacularly. Anyway, turn down the lights, crank up the fan till it sounds like a sandstorm, and let your body sink into your bed like a pharaoh on his day off. Can you imagine waking up in ancient Egypt, tongue-coated like the inside of a pyramid, desperate for Gatorade, but with nothing but bread and amulets? Did anyone ever regret their night at the afterlife karaoke bar? And just how desperate do you have to be to trust a necklace over water and bread? Get ready to find out. Because, congratulations, you've just woken up in 2000 BCE, sprawled out between a reed mat and an amphora, with the world's first hangover and no Advil in sight. Your only hope, something mysterious, something possibly magic, something you hang around your neck and pray does more than just look fashionable. Congratulations. You've made it through the night. Barely. The ancient Egyptian sun blazes through your thatched roof, stabbing you right in the retinas. Your mouth feels like someone left a clay brick in it overnight. And the only thing louder than your pounding head is the distant braying of a donkey that, frankly, sounds just as hungover as you feel. You attempt to swallow, but your tongue feels enormous and dry, like a sun-baked cob of barley. The remnants of last night's revelries are strewn across the small clay table by your bed. An empty jug of date wine, a crust of yesterday's bread, and an inexplicably soggy feather. You gingerly sit up, only to discover that the palm blanket meant to keep the desert chill at bay failed spectacularly. Sand is everywhere, in your hair, your clothes, and somehow between your teeth. The air in your single-room mud-brick home is oppressive. With every laboured breath, you inhale a cocktail of heat, dust, and the pungent memory of old onions. It's a scent that belongs less to a human dwelling and more to an enthusiastic camel stable. You glare at the lone window carved into your wall, the bright desert sun streaming through the reed mat, mocking you with its relentless cheeriness. A faint memory of the previous night returns. The high-spirited festival, the music of the sistrum rattling through the village, and most vividly, that third cup of fermented fig beer you swore you didn't need. There's a fresh smear of coal under your eyes, and your tunic smells suspiciously of river mud. The sensation of regret is as deep as the Nile at flood. As your senses gradually kick back to life, so do your responsibilities. Through the low hum of early morning activity in the village, you can pick out the regular rhythm of your neighbour's grindstone and the distant voices of traders setting up their reed baskets along the dusty path. It is, undoubtedly, a work day, and there will be no gentle easing into it. In the life of an ordinary Egyptian, even a bad hangover doesn't merit a day off. Sobek, the crocodile god, may protect the Nile, but he doesn't care how much you overdid it last night. Dragging yourself upright, you remember the basin of water you left by the door. A quick splash to your face is both a relief and a stark reminder that cold water in Egypt is a luxury measured in fleeting seconds before the sun turns it tepid. You catch sight of your reflection in the water's surface, bleary-eyed, sand-specked, and unmistakably worse for wear. The donkey outside brays again as if in solidarity. You fumble with a stale barley cake, nibbling it cautiously, hoping it will soak up the lingering sourness of last night's excesses. Breakfast is a modest affair. A few olives, maybe a dab of honey if you're fortunate. The same meal that has started your days for years, punctuated only occasionally by something more exotic, usually on festival days, and always followed by regret. There's no time for self-pity. The family expects you to fetch water from the well. Your mother barks an order before you muster the courage to stand. Your little sister scurries by, giggling at your dishevelled state, no doubt eager to recount your sorry appearance to anyone within earshot. You throw on your linen tunic, already roughened by countless washings, and step out into the sunlight, blinking like a startled ibis. The land outside is a swirl of ochre and gold, the Nile's distant shimmer promising life for another day. Still, as you shoulder your water jar and listen to the chorus of early morning Egypt, children laughing, pots clanking, the merchant's call, you realize that here regret is as common as sand, an inescapable part of waking up under the ancient sun. One day, you swear under your breath you'll ease up on the festival spirits. But for now, there's work to be done. And in Egypt, neither sun, sand, nor regret waits for anyone. Let's get scientific. You're sweating date wine, your brain has turned to papyrus, and your stomach's staging a coup against last night's honeyed bread. Welcome to the world's oldest version of never drinking again, as dispatched by Ra himself. First, let's paint the scene. You're awoken not by the gentle rays of sunrise creeping through your reed hut, but by the relentless squawk of sacred ibises. Your mouth, it turns out, is less like the lush banks of the Nile and more like the tail end of the Sahara. The taste lingers, salt, sour, and a worrying hint of whatever made that beer cloudy. Is this divine punishment, or just another Tuesday in Thebes? Ancient Egyptian hangovers weren't just a matter of pounding heads and dry mouths. They were chronicled in detail on papyrus and ostraca for posterity and, one suspects, mutual commiseration. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, more famous for recipes involving brain surgery than brunch, devotes a few lines to sickness of the stomach after festival libations. Meanwhile, in every bustling market and mud brick tavern, rumours swirl of telltale symptoms. The runny nose, the damp forehead, the sense that Anubis himself is drumming on your skull. Descriptions are alarmingly familiar, even if the setting isn't. Let's break down the classic Egyptian hangover checklist, item by item. First and foremost, monumental headache. Not just any ache, mind you, but one worthy of the gods. Think the pounding of temple drums at sunrise and you're halfway there. Next, the infamous belly of Set. Legend had it that Set, god of chaos, had a fondness for upending the digestive tracts of overzealous revelers. Expect the complete trilogy: nausea, rumbling intestines, and the occasional need to sprint to the nearest bodega-sized outhouse. No hangover is complete without the heavy blanket of regret. Among the ruins, archaeologists have uncovered ancient toasts, scratched into pottery, that escalate from "May life sweeten your days" to "May Thoth, have mercy on my body tomorrow." Regret is eternal, it seems, and often accompanied by short-term amnesia. Did I really tell the scribe that his handwriting resembled a chicken's footprints? Was I challenged to a crocodile wrestling contest? And God's help me, did I accept? Ancient medicine tried, as doctors do, to tame the beast. Remedies ranged from the well-intentioned lotus leaf poultices and barley water to the unspeakable ground crocodile scales. Anyone? The medical papyri advise balance, hydration, rest, appease the gods with small offerings, and if possible, keep your head lower than your heart. Some brave soul, somewhere along the Nile, recommended the hair of the hound, a shot of whatever felled you the night before. Did it work? Hard to say. Records from the next day are, understandably, illegible, but there's more than just physical misery. The truly Egyptian hangover attacks all the senses. Light is amplified, sound travels in waves, and your once adoring cat now becomes an imperious, judgmental overseer. You're forced out into the blinding sun to fulfill your duties, grinding grain, hauling bricks, praying the vizier doesn't notice your flushed, woozy face. All the while, you battle suspicion. Maybe the neighbour's evil eye is to blame, or perhaps you accidentally angered a minor god. There's no time for navel-gazing. Just surviving the day feels like a ritual in itself. So, did the ancient Egyptians shake their fists at the heavens and vow, never again? Absolutely. Did they mean it? Judging from the tomb wall scenes, festive gatherings, goblets raised, probably not. The hangover, it seems, is as eternal as the pyramids, aching, unpleasant, yet somehow the price of revelry and part of what bound these people, generation after generation, in laughter, regret, and the endless quest for a cure. Let me know if you want any adjustments, added scholarly touches, or more vivid scene setting. Before you start blaming the beer, let's talk beverages. Beer in Egypt isn't craft IPA. It's more like a chunky soup of wheat, barley, and whatever dubious microbes the Nile washed in that week. Wine? Only if you're rich or reckless, but always a gamble. If you think modern tap water can be sketchy, you'd faint at the Nile's beverage list. The river gave, and the river polluted, all at once. Most Egyptians wouldn't dare drink straight water unless their physician was already busy writing a will. Instead, beer was the great equalizer. Forget frothy heads or chilled mugs. Ancient Egyptian beer was a thick, gritty porridge, half ferment, half breakfast cereal. It was nutritious, filling, and probably the only reason you could face another day of pyramid construction, or, as they called it, a job. But this beer was no lightweight. The alcohol content was low, but the effect? Sit down with a bowl of Nile soup after a day in the sun, and you'd feel something. Just not what you'd call buzzed today. Egyptian beer barely got out of the fermentation gate. It was fizzy, yes, but borderline sour, chunky, and depending on the season, could come with a bonus helping of floating river algae or crushed reeds from the harvest. No wonder children drank it too. It was like liquid bread with a microbial twist, guaranteed to be safer than the water itself. And let's not forget who made this beer: the women of the household. Brewing was domestic work, somewhere between baking bread and chasing goats out of the grain bins. Recipes called for doughy loaves half-baked, then crumbled into water for spontaneous fermentation. There were no yeast packets, just whatever happened to be in the air, meaning quality control ranged between decent and visit to the afterlife. The hierarchy of bartending was alive and well. Now, wine in Egypt comes with its own saga. A drink for the elite, for high priests and pharaohs who could access both the grapes and the storage that kept wine from turning to vinegar on a hot day. Imported vintages from the Levant fetched prices that would make a Wall Street sommelier weep. But even local Egyptian wine was a hit or miss affair. Let's put it this way. If your tomb painting shows you clutching a goblet, you either lived large or liked to gamble with intestinal risk. Of course, there were alternatives: date wine for the adventurous, or cooled pomegranate juice for the prudent, if you could get your hands on it. Herbal infusions made their rounds as health tonics and ceremonial drinks. Sometimes these potions were doctor recommended, sometimes they were priest prescribed, and sometimes They were probably a desperate attempt to mask whatever was growing on your water jug. Still, if you were in the right house, on the right festival, you might have sampled hibiscus or honey-sweetened water, which could taste like the nectar of the gods, or, just as likely, like yesterday's leftovers. Drinking, it turns out, was as social as survivalist. Beer was rationed out with wages. A pyramid builder could expect as much as a few full bowls a day, depending on the season and how many blocks of limestone he hauled. Even priests weren't above enjoying their share, though theirs may have been blessed with a sprig of papyrus or a less chunky finish. Meanwhile, the very poor sometimes had to settle for water, sweetened with whatever fruit or herb was left after the market stall closed, hoping the flavour would mask the taste of the Nile's realities. In sum, ancient Egyptian beverages were a snapshot of their world, resourceful, communal, and always at the mercy of the Nile. Whether you were toasting the gods or just trying to stay alive, every gulp came with a risk, a reward, and a whole lot of floating bits. So next time someone offers you a craft brew, think back to ancient Egypt and count your blessings. You're probably only risking a hangover, not a run-in with Nile microbes. No double espresso to save you here. You stumble to the family altar, desperate for relief, while your neighbour swears by onion soup, and somebody else suggests, just dying. Anubis is probably rolling his eyes at the lot of you. Welcome to ancient Egypt on a rough morning. Forget caffeine. The day starts not with a jolt, but with a ritual, a concoction, or, failing both, a bit of theatrics. The average Egyptian faced mornings with far fewer godsends in the kitchen, but a surprising arsenal of remedies in the household. Let's be honest, their options were as fascinating as they are dubious. Picture this. The first rays of the sun filter through a windowless mud brick home, casting shadows over reed mats and leftover dreams. If someone in the household wakes up feeling less than lively, whether from a bad night, a bad meal, or a bad spirit, there's only one solution. Immediate intervention by the family's resident doctor. Read, the oldest person present. Maybe you're offered a strong-smelling poultice for your throbbing head, made by crushing garlic with figs and a splash of date wine. Will it work? Science says unlikely, but ancient Egyptians said, drink it anyway. The ancient Egyptian approach to wellness was a mix of medical know-how, religious belief, and a big dose of imagination. Their remedies weren't just about what went into your mouth, but what came out of it too. Words mattered. There was a firm belief that reciting an incantation, or crying dramatically for the benefit of Bastet, had a tangible effect on one's symptoms. There are genuine recipes from ancient papyri that read like a mixture of an herbalist's shopping list and a spellbook. Have a sore throat? Mix yeast, honey, and natron. That's basically ancient baking soda. And add a prayer to Thoth for intellectual oversight. Still suffering? Clearly you've annoyed Hathor. Try again, with more sincerity. And the neighbours had opinions. The house next door swears by onion soup, even if onions have more to do with pungent breath than actual healing. The apothecary markets a salve made from crushed scarab beetles, because what's good for the gods must be good for sniffles. If all else fails, there's always just dying, because every community has its resident cynic. There's no Jeremiad against lazy solutions here, though. Instead, these remedies are a glimpse at how Egyptians made sense of suffering. Not alone, but communally, and with as much humour as possible. The act of seeking help was almost as important as the cure itself. It brought family together, made neighbours talk, and let everyone commiserate over another morning's misfortune. Let's be clear. Egyptian medicine wasn't all ritual and hope. They were the first to attempt surgical sutures, used mouldy bread as an antibacterial poultice centuries before Fleming and penicillin, and knew the importance of keeping wounds clean. But for the garden variety morning malaise, the aching head, the bad mood, the existential dread, most solutions relied on time-tested folk wisdom, or failing that, whoever could shout their remedy loudest. In a world without coffee, the best remedy wasn't a physical cure, but a good story, a ritual, and a network of care. That, maybe, was the real secret. Whether it was the hum of a chant, a spicy onion broth, or a beloved grandmother insisting that beetle salve can fix anything. The morning always ended the same, with laughter, resignation, and occasionally, actual relief. Anubis might still be rolling his eyes, but the household marches on, fortified by hope, ritual, and one very questionable poultice. So, next time you reach for your morning coffee and thank modern medicine, spare a thought for the inventive, resilient Egyptians who managed to fight off the yawns and sometimes even the plague without a single shot of espresso. Let me know if you'd like the tone dialed up or down, any humour adjusted, or any other tweaks. Here's a fun fact. Nile water is not the hydrating refreshment you dream of. Drinking straight from the river is basically spinning the dysentery lottery. Turns out, trusting a necklace isn't the worst idea after all. While in movies and TV shows, we often see ancient people sloshing back clear, sparkling water from rivers and wells. The reality was far less cinematic. The Nile, for all its life-giving properties, was also a busy thoroughfare teeming with dangers both visible and microscopic. Crocodiles and hippos might grab headlines for river hazards, but the real villains were the parasites, bacteria, and other invisible little nasties swirling beneath the surface. Picture every sip as a roll of the dice, with the winnings sometimes being a week of stomach cramps and a crash course in ancient medicine. But why was this river, the pride and literal lifeline of Egypt, such a risky source? Let's consider what the Nile was to the average Egyptian: an open highway, a marketplace, and a garbage disposal, all rolled into one. Farmers washed their tools, fishermen cleaned their daily catch, and everyone, from bustling city dwellers to rural villagers, bathed and sometimes emptied out other things into the water. Human and animal waste blended with plant debris and rotting food. It wasn't just the water that flowed, it was a soup of civilizations, with all the biological risks that entailed. So, athletes of the ancient world, labourers at the pyramids, and city planners at Memphis faced the same problem. You need water to live, but the water itself could make you desperately ill. Faced with this, Egyptians got clever. Instead of relying on possibly contaminated river water, they turned to drinks that were boiled, fermented, or processed. All methods that could kill off at least some of the bacterial baddies. Beer, for instance, wasn't just for parties. It was nearly a dietary staple, consumed alongside every meal. Its brewing process meant boiling the grain and water, a step that wouldn't make the beer safe by modern standards, but definitely increased the odds over raw river water. And then there's the necklace referred to in our opening. Ancient amulets and charms might sound superstitious to the modern mind, but they served dual purposes: spiritual insurance and tangible, physical reminders of the dangers in daily life. Wearing a lucky scarab or an eye of Horus wasn't just about pleasing the gods. It was about carrying a little confidence booster against whatever unseen hazards the Nile had in store. It's tempting to ask, why didn't they just filter the water? After all, the Egyptians were master engineers. In fact, there's evidence they sometimes settled for clarifying water, letting suspended particles settle and skimming the clearer liquid. But microscopic pathogens, the real disease spreaders, were beyond what the naked eye and ancient technology could filter or boil away completely. Even today, Water purification is a nuanced science. Back then, the safest bet was the tried and true. Ferment it or avoid it. What's especially interesting is how social customs evolved in tandem with these practical concerns. Beer and wine weren't just beverages, they were social glue, religiously significant and deeply woven into the rituals of daily life. Precisely because they were safer than the dusty, dubious water source outside. Sharing beer was sharing life itself. So, to sum it up, ancient Egyptians didn't drink straight from the Nile out of superstition or ignorance. They did it out of hard-won experience. Every family, every community had learned, some the hard way, that a little extra effort or fermentation made all the difference, and sometimes trusting the wisdom symbolized by a humble necklace was better than taking your chances with refreshing river water. That, and nobody wanted to be remembered as the official who held up pyramid construction because they had a bad case of Nile tummy. Amethyst strung on flax, shaped into little grape clusters, supposed to ward off drunkenness, because nothing says morning after like accessorizing your shame with a mystical purple rock. But before you scoff at the idea of bedazzled mineral therapy, let's set the scene. Ancient Greeks and Romans weren't exactly shy when it came to their wine. Symposiums flowed with the stuff, social hierarchies dissolved, and drunken philosophy flourished. Sometimes with more slurred words than actual wisdom. The hangover, as ever, was the uninvited guest that just wouldn't leave. This resulted in desperate innovation, and few solutions were as endearingly earnest, or oddly chic, as the anti-hangover amulet. Amethyst, named after the Greek amethystos, literally translates to not intoxicated. The story goes that Dionysus, god of wine and perennial party thrower, was so insulted by mortals one day that he vowed to unleash tigers upon the next human he saw. Enter Amethyst, a maiden who crossed his path. To save her, the goddess Artemis turned her into pure, glimmering quartz. Overcome with remorse, Dionysus wept wine onto the stone, staining it purple. Thus, the myth, wear amethyst and you'll be untouched by drink. Science? No. Good narrative. Absolutely. Picture the ancient reveller. He's already embraced questionable choices, guzzling whatever passed for Bordeaux in a clay cup. So why not go all in and throw on a grape cluster necklace? It wards off hangovers, some wise elder winks. Did it actually work? Not even a little. The average hangover then, as now, scoffed at both gemstone accessories and herbal hangover cures alike. But that didn't stop a brisk trade in such talismans, because human hope is a force that easily outpaces human logic, especially when headaches are involved. The anti-hangover necklace wasn't limited to the Mediterranean either. Amethyst's supposed sobering effects caught on in Persia, the Middle Ages, and well into the Victorian era. Priests, kings, and anyone with a taste for both wine and magical thinking embraced it. The necklace became a status symbol, equal parts jewelry, medical device, and conversation piece. Flashy, yet practical. Or so everyone pretended, until their temples began to throb the morning after. Fast forward to today, and you'll still find amethyst bracelets strolling down the aisles of metaphysical shops, Instagram boutiques, and even the occasional wellness pop-up, promising balance, energy, and of course reprieve from overindulgence. Influencers might not mention hangovers directly, but the not-so-subtle whisper is there. Buy this, and you'll dodge regret. Plus, it matches your yoga pants. Let's not underestimate the psychological power of ritual, though. Drinking responsibly might not be as fun as donning a magical necklace, but there's something universal about the desire for a shortcut, a talisman, or secret spell that'll let us get away with just one more glass. Maybe that's why the anti-hangover necklace myth persists. It's not about chemistry. It's about charm, literal and figurative. In the end, the story of the anti-hangover necklace isn't really about science or even about hangovers. It's a window into the eternal human hope that there's a way around consequences, preferably one that sparkles. And sure, modern medicine will roll its collective eyes at the idea of detox jewelry. But maybe the Greeks were onto something. If you're going to face the pain of the morning after, you might as well look good doing it. So next time you toast to good health, consider accessorizing with a bit of amethyst. It won't save you from your choices, but it will give you a story to tell while you nurse that inevitable headache, just like it did for partygoers 3,000 years ago. Because if you can't outsmart a hangover, you can at least outdress it. Storytelling structure. Personalized vignettes. Each section frequently opens with a vivid, imagined, or semi-humorous scenario, often zooming in to a moment, character, or question. Conversational progression. Ideas flow naturally, often building on or riffing off the preceding thought, with segues that involve wit or inquisitive asides. Reflective digressions. There's a tendency to break the main story and insert meta-commentary or hypothetical extensions, pushing the audience to wonder, what if? Tone. Wry and playful. The overall effect is warmly satirical. There's affection for the subject, but also a readiness to poke fun or undercut seriousness. Lightly self-deprecating. The narrator often positions themselves as an amused outsider, sharing a laugh with the audience about human oddities. Curious and imaginative. There's a genuine fascination animating the script, but it's filtered through facetious rhetorical questions and creative speculation. Writing style. Short, punchy sentences. Ideas are delivered incisively, frequently with emphatic punctuation and line breaks that give space for comedic timing. Figurative and visual language. The writing leans on metaphor, hyperbole, and visual imagination to make ancient or distant practices vivid, e.g., the ancient Etsy marketplace. Modern vernacular. The language bridges the past and the present, using contemporary references to make ancient behaviors relatable. Based on these patterns, here's an expanded 600-word segment for: who made these necklaces? Some poor craftsman hunched over, stringing beads and muttering, maybe this one will finally work for my uncle. The ancient Etsy marketplace must have been wild, but let's pause a moment and really picture that world. A cacophony of hawkers and tent flaps, dogs yapping, the sharp jangle of metal bits, each jeweler at their table, hoping for a miracle. Not for fame, obviously. Fame isn't what you get from engraving "do not drink" runes on a potato. Their hope was simpler, more poignant, to sell trinkets that promised to do what no prayer, prohibition, or willpower could. The carrot on the stick. Only the carrot is jade, and the stick is desperation. The craftsman's clientele? Imagine a parade of anxious wives, crusty priests, sons gambling away their father's fortunes and futures on another guaranteed cure. This lapis lazuli amulet. Yes, madam. It not only wards off evil but makes ale taste like turnip soup. Your Arav will swear off the tavern forever. No refunds. You can almost feel the hope and skepticism crashing into each other in the marketplace air. Each piece of jewelry, a cross between a medical prescription and a fashion statement. Do I want to be sober, or do I just want a new pendant? Somewhere in that murky consumer math is the tacit understanding. The amulet will only work if you believe in it. But who could resist? If science fails and prayer is just air, perhaps obsidian on a leather cord could tip the scales. And yet, behind the irony and the commerce, there's a tragic dignity to these jewelers. They weren't fools. They knew that tying bits of crystal around someone's neck wouldn't perform the neurological ballet needed to break an addiction. But they also knew despair is good for business, and hope is the ultimate marketing tool. Sometimes, providing a sense of agency, here, slip this on, now you're safer, was its own kind of medicine. Did they have bestsellers? You bet. The bezel of Blessed Abstinence sold out every spring festival. Limited edition, hand-carved, probably by someone already 3 drinks deep. Less magical cure, more everyone else is wearing one. Might as well try. In a strange way, the sobriety amulet mirrored the hungers and anxieties swirling through its nostrils to more. Ein Sachin Inchen, Hra. Something to how. So, Schatze for Sunrise, the desperate search for fixes, for answers in tangible form. If nothing else, it kept the artists busy and the shoppers distracted, which, if you think about it, has been the function of the wellness industry for thousands of years. Sometimes people returned months later, sheepish and hangdog, clutching a necklace that had clearly not lived up to its mystical billing. And the jeweler, with the seasoned wisdom of a medieval therapist, probably shrugged. Perhaps you need a stronger stone. Or 2. With each transaction, the cycle of hope and disappointment spun again, and the craftsman's humble hands strung another bead for the next seeker. Of course, the real magic wasn't in the lapis, jasper, or string. It was in the stories woven and worn, each amulet a tiny theatre of hope, anxiety, commerce, and belief. Evidence that, sometimes, all we want is something we can wear against our skin. Proof we're doing something to wrestle our demons. If that something happens to catch the light and look good with your tunic, well, even better. So, next time you see an empowerment bracelet or sobriety jewelry glowing on someone's Instagram feed, think of those ancient jewelers, equal parts artist, therapist, and optimist, stringing their little miracles for the masses. We've changed, and not a bit at all. Nothing brings out your eyes like a necklace that tells the world, I make poor life choices. Is it working? Jury's still out, but at least you look fresh at sunrise, even if you smell like a brewery. While the concept of wearable hangover cures might sound like something out of a late-night infomercial, complete with a questionably enthusiastic host and a dubiously legitimate scientific study, it's actually a real trend. Yes, somewhere between aromatherapy lockets and energy bracelets, a new market emerged. Necklaces and wristbands that promise to prevent your hangover, or at least make you look like you know what a kombucha is. We have arrived at a moment in history where your accessories don't just complete your outfit. They claim to detoxify your bloodstream. These fashion meets pharmacology innovations come in many forms. Some are amulets filled with essential oils, peppermint for nausea, lavender for headache, and maybe a hint of desperation. Others are bracelets laced with vitamins or minerals that slowly absorb through your skin, if you believe the marketing. The catch? Most of these miracle products cost roughly the same as the 2 rounds of cocktails that created your predicament in the first place. But let's talk about the science. Or more accurately, the light cardio workout science gets running away from these claims. The human body is extremely good at rejecting shortcuts, especially shortcuts that involve wearing your cure rather than drinking water, eating food, or, not drinking the mystery punch in the first place. While there is some evidence that scents like peppermint or ginger can help alleviate mild nausea, you could achieve the same effect by sniffing your spice rack, rather than splurging on an amulet that looks suspiciously like a cat toy. Still, the appeal is obvious. There's something oddly comforting about the idea that a little charm around your neck might quietly filter out your sins while you smile serenely over brunch. It's magical thinking with a chic, Instagram-friendly update. The promise is not just feel better, but look good while feeling terrible. Let he who has not chosen an accessory based on their hangover survival potential cast the first empty mimosa glass. Social media only fans the flames. Scroll through the feeds and you'll see influencers swearing by their hangover cure jewelry, hairstyled perfectly, despite last night's tequila showdown. There are hashtags, cross-promotions, and even influencers who will unbox their post-party recovery kit for thousands of eager followers. In this digital ecosystem, the line blurs between genuine relief and clever branding. The bracelet works if it makes your selfie pop, even if your liver remains unconvinced. Of course, there's also the small matter of fashion itself. Let's be honest, designing a hangover cure you can wear gives you license to shop for jewelry on the pretext of responsible health. And that's a marketing masterstroke. Whether you favor minimalist metallics or conversation piece crystals, there's a hangover cure tailored to your vibe. Some even change color depending on your body temperature, which means you can spend your Sunday brunch subtly monitoring your life force like a pet iguana. But even as we play dress up with our recovery, there's a sly wink behind the whole idea. Everyone understands, at least subconsciously, that no necklace is going to undrink the drinks or untext the exes. The products themselves become more of a talisman, a physical reminder that we're all works in progress, making dubious decisions with stylish accessories to match. So, is it fashion or folly? Maybe it's a little bit of both. In the parade of products that promise to rescue us from ourselves, wearable hangover cures strike a particular balance. Part self-care, part self-delusion, and all a performance of hope for next time. After all, if you have to suffer for your art, you might as well accessorize accordingly. You might ask, why amethyst? Because ancient people believe purple had magical, anti-intoxicant powers. It's a lot like eating burnt toast post-wine night and hoping for the best. Sometimes belief is all you've got. Now, if you imagine a toga-clad Greek philosopher gripping a cup of wine in one hand and a gleaming purple stone in the other, you're not far off from the truth. Stories and legends passed down for centuries would have us believe that amethyst was a partygoer's best friend, a stone said to safeguard you from drunkenness, hangovers, and the subsequent airing of regrettable dance moves. The belief had such staying power that the name amethyst itself literally translates from the Greek amethystos, not intoxicated. There's ancient art, literature, and more than a few slightly exaggerated fables to back it up. But let's take off the rose, or should I say, violet, coloured glasses for a moment. What does science actually have to say about all this? Spoiler, not much. Unlike the endless studies on coffee's magical powers, amethyst hasn't exactly been the darling of the scientific community. Chemistry textbooks aren't bursting with diagrams showing amethyst molecules blockading alcohol. In fact, amethyst is a variety of quartz coloured by traces of iron and irradiation. A geology fun fact, but a far cry from a hangover cure. When the scientific method does walk into the room, it usually asks awkward questions. Has anyone ever run a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial on amethyst's anti-booze claims? Not really. Has a physicist detected mysterious sober rays being emitted from amethyst crystals? Also, no. If you want hard evidence, the data is softer than yesterday's wine-soaked bread. So why did this myth stick around for thousands of years? On that note, science does have something interesting to offer. Humans are champions of pattern making. Our brains love a just so story, especially one that turns a sparkly rock into a shield against the consequences of overindulgence. This tendency is known as magical thinking, And it's the same engine that gave us lucky rabbit's feet, horseshoes above doors, and astrology apps with suspiciously specific horoscopes. But before we laugh off these ancient beliefs entirely, let's give credit where credit's due. For the ancients, the world was unpredictable and at times harsh. If a beautiful gemstone helped someone feel just a bit more in control of their evening, well, mission accomplished. The placebo effect is a powerful thing. Sometimes, believing you have a hangover shield is almost as good as, well, actually having one. Fast forward to today, and amethyst still finds itself front and center in new age shops, wellness trends, and Instagram feeds. It's touted for everything from clearing negative energy to aiding meditation. Modern science remains unconvinced, but the appeal of a pocket-sized talisman hasn't waned. Maybe deep down, we all crave a little bit of magic in a world ruled by facts and figures. To sum it up, the science behind amethyst and its anti-intoxication legend is more glitter than gold, more anecdote than analysis. Yet that doesn't mean the stone is entirely powerless, just that its real power might exist in the stories we tell ourselves, not in the atoms within the crystal. So, next time someone hands you a glass of wine and a chunk of amethyst, you'll know, science won't save you, but hey, neither will burnt toast. Some traditions survive not because they're proven, but because they're dazzling, comforting, and above all, deeply human. Cheers to that. Bread soaked in beer, cabbage leaves worn as hats, and meditative prayer circles to Hathor, goddess of joy and headaches, history's first brunch menu, and none of it involves French toast. Let's set the scene. You're waking up somewhere around 1500 BCE, your head throbbing from last night's festival of drunken debauchery by the Nile. There's no ibuprofen, no cold-pressed juice cleanse, not a single Bloody Mary in sight. The only thing greasier than your skin is the roasted goose you regret binging at 2 a.m, and your buddy Amenhotep is passed out under the world's scratchiest reed mat, mumbling about the wrath of Hathor. So what's an ancient Egyptian to do? Improvise, creatively, desperately. Beer, the double-edged sword, first in the ancient triage kit. More beer. Yes, the cause was the supposed cure. Scholars suggest Egyptians prescribed beer soup for the morning after, a hearty chunk of stale bread dropped into a clay cup and drowned in yesterday's leftover kvass. Maybe it was a proto-eggs, Benedict. Maybe it just killed the taste of last night's regret. The yeasty potion certainly filled you up and possibly provided some carbohydrates and B vitamins, if you could keep it down. Vegetable headwear, early wellness. Trend or Instagram fail. Next, some truly avant-garde millinery. Cabbage leaves, worn not as salad, but as hats. That's right. Egyptians believed the cooling power of cabbage could draw the feverish heat and spirits out of your skull. Imagine a pre-brunch Instagram photo, eyeliner smudged, linen wrinkled, and half a vegetable stuck to your forehead. Supposedly, cabbage contained magical properties to appease the gods of excess. Or maybe it just distracted everyone from your inability to speak in full sentences. Divine intervention, now with extra chanting. Of course, when in doubt, blame or beg the gods. Enter Hathor, the patroness of mirth, music, and massive morning after migraines. Texts suggest prayer circles convened for some communal atonement, equal parts meditation and group therapy. Participants, draped in their finest, would offer up lotus blossoms and presumably apologies on the temple steps, beseeching Hathor to grant relief, or at the very least, some cosmic understanding. This practice was less about medicine, more about mindfulness. Think ancient group-guided meditation, but with more frankincense and fewer matching yoga mats. Wacky home remedies, smoked crocodile fat and figs. The desperate, of course, took it further, Papyrus scrolls detail substances you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Elixirs, blending, honey, fig, and a splash of aged Nile water, perhaps a dash of onion juice for good measure. Myrrh and olibanum were burned for their fragrant, possibly distracting properties. In truly dire cases, records imply a paste of crocodile fat was massaged onto the temples. Whether this worked is anyone's guess, but it likely guaranteed personal space on the morning ferry to work. Ancient detox, bathhouses, and the power of sweat. Cleansing rituals weren't just spiritual. Sweating it out in a communal bathhouse or basking beneath the merciless Egyptian sun was prescribed for those stubbornly resistant bad spirits. Imagine steam, scented oil, and the endless sound of people complaining about how they'll never drink like that again. A timeless global refrain. Final thoughts. Some things never change. In the end, the ancient Egyptian hangover cure was less science, more spectacle, part breakfast, part performance art, part desperate bargaining with higher powers. While modern brunch might boast avocado toast and craft mimosas, the underlying wish is unchanged: to recover, renew, and maybe learn a lesson or two. Until the next party, anyway. So next time you wince at a green juice or quirky wellness trend, remember, at least you're not wearing a cabbage hat to impress the gods or drinking yesterday's beer for breakfast. Ancient wisdom or wild guess, the hangover, like human nature, has never truly changed. You can't shake the feeling that everyone at the breakfast table knows exactly why you're wearing your new necklace. They nod in ancient camaraderie, a look that says, "Been there, regretted that." Still, the real discomfort doesn't spark from that fleeting shame, the nods of empathy, or the hangover remedies swapped over burnt coffee. It's later, when you say the words out loud, "I'm trying not to drink tonight." The conversation stalls. Jokes about being boring flutter around, thin as paper napkins. You recognize the choreography, the way eyes flicker and glasses refill, the quick pivot to someone else's story, the little rush to distance themselves from your self-imposed restriction. In a world where alcohol is the default setting, abstaining feels like an act of rebellion, less like refusing a drink and more like declining a secret handshake. At barbecues, at weddings, after-work drinks, every invitation comes pre-packaged with assumptions. You don't drink lands not as curiosity, but as concern. Are you okay? Tests for damage, scans for failure. Humor becomes a thin cover, making light of your choice so everyone else can stay comfortable. The spiral starts subtly. One friend cracks, "Don't trust a man who won't drink with you." Another asks, "Pregnant? Or just boring?" The pressure isn't malicious. It's centuries old, woven as tightly into our rituals as the linen around wine bottles. There's a reward for clicking glasses and a social toll for wanting out. If you're not careful, the shame can double back. First, shame for what you did while drinking. Then a fresh, stickier shame for being the difficult one, the outlier. There's also the internal monologue, the social accountant in your brain tallying costs. How many events did I skip? How many times did I laugh too hard or leave too early? What's my story now that "I can't believe we did that" is off the table? In these small calculations, it's easy to forget you're reframing your identity, not just your Saturday nights. But beneath all this awkwardness, a strange thing happens. The longer you don't drink, the more you see the unspoken rules. Alcohol is the social lubricant, but also a shared blindfold. What's remembered and what's forgotten, what's excused and what's never spoken of again. Sobriety, by contrast, is sharp-edged. You see the jokes that get repeated, the anxieties masked by laughter, the relief of just one more round. Some part of you aches to belong exactly as you once did, while another part wonders why you ever needed alcohol to grease the lock on ordinary conversation. Recovery doesn't just mean giving up the thing that hurt you. It means learning how to sit with the silence your former habits once filled. There's humility, yes, but also an unexpected defiance in being the sober one at the table. You start finding allies, the friend who nurses a soda, the uncle who quietly confides he's taking a break too, the co-worker who thanks you for breaking the ice. Gradually, a new camaraderie forms. Not always as loud, but often more genuine. What feels at first like exile slowly turns into relief. You begin to play a new role in the group, quietly showing that it's possible to stay, to listen, to laugh. No drink required. In a hard-drinking society, refusing the next round is an act of self-respect disguised as inconvenience. If there's a spiral, it's not just downward. It can also lead upward, toward a different kind of belonging. Priests claim the necklace wards off evil spirits. You're not sure about spirits, but you do wish it could scare off the memory of last night's interpretive dance. But for centuries, people have turned to sacred objects for protection. Not just from ill-intentioned apparitions, but also from hangovers, heartbreak, and embarrassing toe stubs in the temple's corridors. These charms are woven into rituals, dipped in incense smoke, and notably, handed out by priests who look far too well rested to have ever battled a headache of earthly origin. Their faith in the necklace's supernatural guard is unshakable, and, if we're being honest, kind of contagious. You watch as a group of pilgrims crowds around the old shrine. The priest, a man with a voice as soft as prayer, but an expression as stern as divine judgment, holds the necklaces aloft. This, he intones, is your shield against darkness. He manages to catch your eye, just long enough to make you question every dubious life choice, especially the buffet. Each necklace is blessed with a chant so rhythmic, it nearly drowns out your internal monologue, replaying last night's dance. Debacle. Almost. The significance of the necklace isn't just spiritual insurance. It's practical, a buffer between you and all the unpredictable forces that descend when faith, superstition, and a little too much communal wine mix together. For every story of a necklace warding off a ghost in the attic, there are 3 more tales of someone surviving after flirting with the ceremonial punch bowl. The line between legend and lived experience gets blurrier with each retelling. No one can quite agree whether the necklace protects the soul, the stomach, or simply the fragile reputation you're holding together by a thread. Old-timers will swear it saved them from a mysterious fever or a string of romantic misadventures, depending on how much you coax out of them over tea. Younger attendees take selfies with their necklaces, tagging posts charmed life, and secretly hoping for miracle-level protection from next week's midterms. You realize, not for the first time, that hope is a universal prayer, no matter what language it's whispered in. But protection, the priests insist, isn't all outward defense. There's a quiet ritual to donning the necklace, a reminder to look for strength within before scanning for phantoms in the shadows. The necklace becomes less of a supernatural insurance policy and more a badge, a tangible cue to choose courage when facing whatever the day brings, be it a haunted hallway or the icy disapproval of last night's dance partner. You start to see why so many people, skeptical or devout, grip their necklaces like lifelines. The skeptics, of course, have their own theories. Some murmur that the necklace's greatest power is psychological, a placebo that convinces the mind to relax, to believe that evil, spiritual or otherwise, will pass by like a cold draft in an ancient church. You're not sure if it's faith, placebo, or just the power of tradition that works its magic. But either way, the necklace sits cool and reassuring against your collarbone. And that's comfort enough. As the ceremony ends, and the crowd disperses, you find yourself clutching your necklace with more sincerity than you'd thought possible. Around you, laughter echoes and incense smoke lingers, a mingling of reverence and relief. Maybe the priests are right. Maybe protection comes in unexpected forms. In amulets, in rituals, in the knowledge that you're part of something bigger than your own clumsy worries. You head out into the sunlight, the necklace hidden beneath your shirt. Spirits, hangovers, and haunting memories may still be out there, but for now, you walk a little taller. Just in case, you give the necklace one last hopeful rub. After last night's interpretive dance, you'll take all the protection you can get. Some tried spells written on ostraca. Some tried cold baths in the Nile. Refreshing turns out to mean hypothermic surprise. Others trusted the healing power of regretting all their life choices at once. Let's set the scene. It's somewhere around 1500 BCE, and you've spent last night's festival making enthusiastic use of the communal wine jug. You wake with the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a jackhammer in your skull. Your eyes creak open, only to be greeted by the midday sun blazing through your mud brick window, and possibly by a slightly annoyed cat sitting on your chest. But despair not. You're not alone in your misery. For thousands of years, Egyptians have been innovating new ways to both celebrate and, more importantly, recover from celebrating. And when it came to hangovers, the ancient world refused to surrender quietly. First up, the magical approach. Scribes and artisans would scribble elaborate incantations onto little shards of pottery called ostraca. The idea was simple: hang your hopes and your hangover on a cleverly worded spell. You might find yourself reciting, "May the gods smite the headache demon dwelling behind my eyes," while balancing an amulet on your forehead. The practice had panache, but the success rate left much to be desired. Turns out, the gods could be a little hard of hearing after festival season. Moving on to more earthly solutions, the Egyptian wellness industry had strong opinions about baths. "Take a quick dip in the Nile," your mother would insist. "It'll wake you right up." She wasn't wrong. The icy rush of river water certainly did something, shocking your system into alertness as you flailed to avoid being swept downstream. Nothing like dodging crocodiles and waterlogged reeds to distract you from your throbbing head. This method did have a secondary benefit. It cleaned off the remnants of yesterday's festivities, so you could at least face your day with dignity and slightly blue lips. For those keen on more culinary remedies, your options were imaginative. Medical papyri recommend a variety of concoctions, most of which sound suspiciously like the result of a bet. There was the tried and true bread and beer approach, essentially a breakfast sandwich soaked in ale. For extra flair, you might add a dollop of mashed beans or a pinch of lotus root. Supposedly, the bread soaked up the toxins, while the beer convinced you things were improving, until the next wave of nausea arrived. On the more creative end, some recommended making a paste from birds' beaks, frankincense, and hair of the dog. Sometimes literally. Apply liberally to your head, or in some cases, eat it. The descriptions are vague, which may have been intentional, allowing future generations to claim plausible deniability. In any case, archaeologists agree. This recipe was less food and more trust exercise. That's not to say the Egyptians didn't know what worked: hydration, a quiet room, and time. But as with so many things in life, the fun lay in the rituals and hope that next time the gods might be more sympathetic. Most importantly, a hangover was a sign that you had participated. You'd been at the festival, eaten with friends, raised a cup to Osiris, or perhaps danced a little enthusiasm into your knees. So, while the medical solutions tended toward creative utility, The ancient Egyptian hangover cure always had one guaranteed ingredient, a really good story to tell afterward, and maybe the wisdom to go lighter on the jug next time. Or at least a new spell written on an ostrakon, just in case. Let me know if you'd like edits or to maintain a specific pace or humour style. Today's menu: hard bread, figs, and more beer. Because apparently they're believers in the hair of the dog cure. Nothing helps like a little more of what you regret. It's early. Sunlight crawls in reluctantly, slanting through the window slats and painting everything gold and dusty. The table before me looks like a stranger's idea of a joke. A dry loaf that could double as a building material. A modest heap of figs, and a clay mug of beer whose temperature, taste, and honesty are all questionable. I stare at the spread, my stomach remembering last night's excesses, and voting a strong no on the repeat. Yet here I am, swallowing pride with the first bite of hard bread. It's a culinary test of willpower and jaw strength, and I suspect someone, somewhere, once broke a tooth on it and simply called it tradition. The figs are a softer reprieve, dense and sweet, determined to glue your teeth together for the rest of the day, but infinitely preferable to the bread. There's an almost meditative rhythm to the process. Crack, chew, blink, bite, repeat. Across the table, my companions look as battered as I feel. We exchange the universal post-feast groan of solidarity, that blend of regret and the unspoken, let's never do that again. Until next time. One brave soul hoists their mug and toasts the old way, for health, for luck, and to keep breakfast in its rightful place at arm's length. There's a half-hearted echo. We drink. The beer is a surprise, somehow both brutishly assertive and quietly comforting. It's not the kind of beer you brag about to friends. No, it's the functional sort. A breakfast beer with no illusions about its place in the world. Historically, it's not as odd as it sounds. In the days before clean water, beer was safer. And besides, it dulled the edges of the morning headache. A fringe benefit not lost on our forebears. I picture ancient brewers inventing this meal, laughing into their barrels and muttering, "It's good enough for breakfast too." Conversation limps along, punctuated by the crack of bread and the sticky silence of figs. Someone tries to start a debate about the best way to survive the aftermath, recommending more figs for fibre, or yet another mug of beer for science. We agree that neither is likely to earn a Michelin star, and that breakfast, much like last night, is an exercise in camaraderie and endurance, rather than cuisine. Outside, the world is waking. Roosters crow, carts rattle by. Someone argues with a sleepy donkey. The ordinariness is soothing, like the city itself is shaking off last night in solidarity. There's comfort in this shared discomfort, an understanding that, through bread, figs, and questionable ale, we'll shore each other up for the day ahead, one bite at a time. As the last crumbs vanish, so too does the fog of the night before. Conversation brightens. The bread gets less hard, or maybe our standards just lower, and hope flickers as we scrape the bottom of the fig bowl. A few brave souls contemplate seconds. We laugh, wincing at the memory of last night's overindulgence, and pledge to develop an innovative new breakfast for tomorrow. Spoiler alert, it will almost certainly be bread, figs, and beer again. But we'll pretend it's exotic. By the end, breakfast feels less like a punishment and more like a badge of honour. Around this table, on this slow brightening morning, we're bound together by food, folly, and the universal truth that nothing cures regret like surviving another round of breakfast together. Turns out the rich and famous were just as prone to hangovers. Cleopatra probably had a closet full of amethyst necklaces and a personal priest on standby with extra talismans. But why stop there? In ancient Egypt, being a celebrity didn't just mean flaunting gold or inventing new eyeliner techniques. You had to be seen living well, and that meant drinking at banquets, socializing at epic parties, and of course not suffering any embarrassing next-day consequences. Cleopatra, a consummate public figure, would have had an image to maintain, looking pale, sweaty, or less than queenly after a palace bacchanal. Unthinkable. That's where the power of celebrity endorsements comes in. Today, social media influencers push detox teas and hangover cures on Instagram. Back then, a nod from the world's most glamorous queen could launch 1,000 talismans. Cleopatra was rumoured to have trusted in amethyst, a purple gemstone believed to prevent drunkenness. The word itself comes from the Greek amethystos, meaning not intoxicated. Picture Cleopatra, draped in her signature violet gems, subtly signalling to her admirers, "I can outlast all of you and still look fabulous." Her closet wasn't just about fashion. These were status symbols with a supernatural twist. Wearing amethyst wasn't simply a style choice. It was a mystical accessory, whispering that you possessed exclusive secrets to remaining sharp and regal, no matter how much you indulged. Cleopatra's patronage made these amulets the it accessory for Egypt's elite, sparking a gemstone craze that persisted for centuries. Who needs a wellness brand deal when your literal face is on the currency? The phenomenon wasn't limited to jewelry. Like today's wellness gurus, Cleopatra's court probably featured an entire cast of health experts, priests, magicians, and medical advisors ready to recommend the latest in anti-hangover rituals. Priceless scrolls detailed special prayers or concoctions involving herbs and honey, all whispered about in the palace halls. It's easy to imagine officials gossiping. "Did you hear? The Queen is now using frankincense aromatherapy." The trend would ripple out through the nobility like an influencer's viral post. As everyone scrambled to get the same potions and talismans, hoping to mimic her legendary resilience. The most ingenious part? Cleopatra, even in her supposed excesses, was always in control of her narrative. She was cultivating a mystique, a public image as both indulgent and invincible. Every party, every gemstone, every whispered secret about a hangover-proof talisman only increased her allure. Her endorsement, spoken or implied, left merchants scrambling to supply the latest must-have charms and smart hosts, toasting Cleopatra's method when the wine started flowing. It's important to realize, too, that these celebrity practices weren't just personal quirks. They were big business. The Egyptian elite would pay handsomely for the same enchanted accessories. Markets swelled with demand, and enterprising jewelers or priests probably invented new variations. Much like today's health industry invents ever fancier versions of detox water, and just like now, skepticism lingered. Not everyone was convinced that a purple rock could stave off a pounding headache. But when the most glamorous woman in the ancient world wore amethyst, who was going to argue? Perhaps Cleopatra's greatest party trick was not just dodging a hangover, but turning even her indulgences into a story of power, exclusivity, and divine favor. The message was clear. Ordinary mortals might suffer the morning after, but the chosen few, those with the right connections, the right symbols, the right sense of style, could transcend it all. In this way, Cleopatra's celebrity endorsement of anti-hangover charms set the template for centuries of wellness fads to come. The tools and platforms have changed, but the power of a star's approval and our collective hope for a magical fix remain exactly the same. And as the party winds down and the final goblets are raised, we realize the search for a hangover cure isn't just about biology. It's about belief, status, and above all, a really good story. Cleopatra was a master of all three. Picture yourself bartering for a necklace in the sweltering market, pretending you're buying it for fashion, and not because you spent last night belting out ancient Taylor Swift. Every marketplace along the Nile has a heartbeat, syncopated by the clang of metal, quick bargaining in dialects that swirl like currents, and the faint, ever-present scent of spices and sweat. The merchant, with his deep-set eyes and sun-lined smile, catches on fast. You're not a local. He gestures to a rack of pendants, each one glinting with a promise of protection, luck, or love. You pick up a scarab, running your finger along its engraved lines, and he launches into a tale you're not quite sure is for real, or just for effect. This, he whispers, was worn by a fisherman who never lost a catch, not even once. You grin, imagining the amulet's storied past, its tiny shell pressed against calloused palms, absorbing hope and perhaps the tang of river fish. But beneath these sales pitches lies something magnetic. Every stall is less a shop and more a stage, and every necklace, bracelet, or beaded anklet is a character in a winding mythology. Traders become the memory keepers, spinning tales that blur fact and fancy with the skill of a seasoned bard. One might hand you a faded turquoise bead, explaining solemnly that it wards off the gaze of envious eyes, conveniently omitting the part where he found it tangled in a heap of other, slightly less mystical jewellery. The line between ancient tradition and modern hustle isn't so much crossed as waltzed over, with a wink. If you linger, you start to spot subtler scenes, the quiet negotiations, the exchange of gossip, the careful way one mother picks a lapis blue pendant for her daughter, tracing its curves as if reading the lines of her future. Amulets here are more than souvenirs. They're vessels for wishes and worries, for secret stories you might never hear. There's the giggling pair of friends debating which charm is best for finding true love, or at least a decent boyfriend. There's the elderly man who buys a battered bronze eye every week, just in case, he says, fortune ever forgets him. Your own barter, of course, turns into theatre. You feign indifference. He frowns, lowers the price. You sigh, ask about the thread. He insists it's spun with a blessing, hands flapping with the gravity of myth. The moment you hesitate, he throws in a tiny chipped faience frog. For luck on your journey. You both know it's less rare artifact, more discontinued trinket. But that hardly matters. Now, this frog is a story you'll retell. Your first Nile marketplace, your persistent merchant, your totally casual necklace. History breathes here in the ordinary. The marketplace is an intersection, a crossing of eras as fluid as the Nile itself. Ancient beliefs survive not in dusty museums, but under sun-bleached canopies, in charm-laden hands and wisecrack deals, echoing with laughter, and, yes, the off-key resurgence of love story wafting from a tourist's phone. You slip your purchase into your bag, feeling a superstition you didn't know you needed. Maybe the scarab will grant good luck, or maybe it'll just remind you of sunburn, laughter, and the art of living. Finding a little magic tucked between the bargaining, the stories, and the inevitable realization that you just paid a bit too much. And as you drift back toward the river, you're sporting a necklace, whether for fashion, nostalgia, or hopeful enchantment. It doesn't really matter. Along the Nile, every amulet is an unfinished story. The next chapter is yours. Now, here's a 600-word Section 18 for modern-day remedies versus ancient amulets, following your required style, structure, and tone. Quick comparison. Coconut water and aspirins versus magic rocks and ancient regret. At least your methods don't double as jewelry. If you grew up believing a glass of orange juice in the morning could fend off everything from the common cold to full-blown existential crisis, congratulations, you're in good company. But spare a thought for our ancient ancestors. Their go-to solutions involved less vitamin C and more quartz. Picture this. You have a raging headache. You reach for cold compress and Tylenol. If you were living a few thousand years ago, though, you'd likely be rummaging for the family amethyst, whispering a half-remembered incantation, and praying the headache was actually from angry spirits, rather than last night's questionable cheese. But let's not pretend we've left all magical thinking behind. Our cupboards may no longer house amulets promising protection from malevolent moons, but they're hardly empty of superstition. Ever noticed how herbal tea for immunity sits right next to your ibuprofen? Or how half of us are only a late-night Googling session away from buying moon-charged crystals off Etsy? In our hearts, we're still a bit medieval, just with faster shipping. Take coconut water. Allegedly, it hydrates, cures hangovers, and may even transform your office-dwelling body into that of a beach-ready demigod. This is modern snake oil in designer packaging. No offense to coconuts, admirable fruit that they are. But beneath our skeptical facades, we still crave quick fixes, secret cures, and the comforting weight of something magical in our pockets or pantries. Ancient amulet, meet contemporary supplement. Don't get me wrong, science is a wonderful thing. Antibiotics are preferable to leeches, and MRI scans beat dream interpretation every time. But the gulf between a shaman waving a chicken bone over your fevered brow and someone in a white coat waving a prescription pad, sometimes it's narrower than we'd like to admit. We're still outsourcing our anxiety, looking for certainty in uncertain times. Just swap the amulet for the Advil, the bones for biohacking podcasts, the village herbalist for a TikTok influencer promising you detox in a bottle. Different altar, same fervour. And let's not overlook the aesthetics. Ancient remedies, for all their questionable efficacy, had style. An amulet strung on leather, a pouch of dried herbs sewn into your cloak. At least you looked interesting as you failed to recover from scurvy. Modern remedies are bland by comparison. Who's ever complimented you on your blister pack of paracetamol, or asked where you got that super chic bottle of extra strength antacids? If you're going to fail at healthcare, shouldn't you at least match your ailments? Perhaps the biggest difference after all this isn't whether the remedy works, but how it feels to believe it might. The placebo effect is ancient magic in a lab coat, proof that human hope is stronger than most pathogens. Maybe your grandmother's evil eye bracelet didn't shield you from the flu, but wearing it sure made the world seem a little safer. In the end, reaching for coconut water or clutching your lucky stone, you're looking for reassurance more than revolution. So, as you uncap your aspirin bottle after a stressful day, take a moment to appreciate the continuum you're part of. One long, glittering chain of worry beads, chant rhythms, and quick solve concoctions, stretching back to the first time someone decided eating willow bark might be worth the stomach upset. There's comfort in tradition, whether it sparkles on your collarbone or dissolves in your glass of water. Just don't expect your headache to care which century your remedy came from. It's tradition to offer honey cakes to whoever you offended last night. In ancient Egypt, everyone's always apologizing for last night's interpretive turkey dance. The morning after a festival in Thebes is less about hangovers and more about social triage. Picture a shuffling parade of sheepish partygoers, each clutching a platter of sticky pastries, weaving their way through sun-baked streets like remorseful ants. There's Bakari, bowing to his neighbour for the enthusiastic retelling of the pharaoh's chickenpox incident. Again, He holds out a honey cake, eyes averted, hoping carbs will drown out the memory. Apologies in ancient Egypt weren't whispered texts or sheepish voicemails. They were full-on public performances. You'd approach your wronged friend, offering honey cakes, and, if circumstances demanded, perform a mumbled song about bad decisions in moonlight. Imagine a world where every social faux pas culminates in a baked goods peace offering and an improvised interpretive dance, complete with symbolic gestures representing falling into the duck pond and accidentally insulting your uncle's moustache. Some Egyptians took the ritual so seriously that bakeries opened at dawn, staffed by apprentices frantically icing cakes with "sorry about the hippo incident" in hieroglyphs. You knew you'd really messed up if your apology was accompanied by not just a honey cake, but a full honey loaf, or, even worse, a honey pyramid. If someone showed up at your mud brick doorstep wielding an architectural apology, you both understood. Things had gotten out of hand. Of course, the real magic was in the specifics. The type of apology suite was a secret code. Simple cake? You only broke someone's reed flute. Elaborate honey tart with lotus garnish. That means you challenged the high priest to a dance-off and won, but shouldn't have. There's even evidence of the rare regret baklava reserved for anybody who accidentally set fire to a sacred ibis nest or sang off key during the blessing of the crocodile. The honey cakes weren't just culinary bribes, they were edible band-aids for society. By midday, Thebes would smell of forgiveness and caramelized sugar, as all the little tensions of the night before dissolved in shared bites. People became amateur confectioners overnight, perfecting secret recipes. Less sugar for family disputes, more nuts if you'd gotten philosophical at the beer stand and insulted someone's favorite deity. If you really wanted to show contrition, you sprinkled extra sesame for "I talked politics after midnight." But it wasn't just about the food. The ritual of regret was a conversation starter, a chance to laugh sheepishly about last night's adventures. Did I really try to teach your donkey the conga? You did, and now he refuses to walk straight. But these honey cakes soften the blow. Apologies transformed into shared stories, complete with mismatched memories and dramatic reenactments. Over time, people forgot the original offense, but remembered the legendary apology. She brought a honey cake shaped like Ra's left sandal. That's real commitment. And what if your apology was rejected? That's when things got truly dramatic. Legend says that the jilted baker was forced to parade their uneaten cakes through the town square. A cautionary spectacle for all would-be mischief makers. It's a scene that would echo for generations. Honey cake, regret, and the hope that next year's festival would end with fewer interpretive turkey dances. And maybe just a little less honey. Each ritual was a gentle reminder. Making mistakes is inevitable, but facing them with candor and carbs can sweeten any bitter memory. In ancient Egypt, forgiveness and dessert was always within reach. Probably some scribe with a good head for marketing, hawking amulets with slogans like "Live, laugh, sober up." But way before you could get kombucha delivered to your cave by app, humans have always looked to charismatic figures for advice on how not to die horribly, or at least how to feel a bit better while doing it. And just like modern social media influencers, the first wellness gurus had a knack not only for selling advice, but for selling themselves, with a potent mix of myth, mystery, and really excellent hair, judging by surviving statues anyway. Take Imhotep, the ancient Egyptian polymath whose name translates loosely to "he who brings peace," and apparently strong opinions about enemas. Imhotep was physician, architect, priest, and all-around overachiever. If you had a headache or an existential crisis in 27th century BCE Memphis, Imhotep was your guy. Not only did he diagnose and prescribe, sometimes literally writing on papyrus what we'd now call a wellness plan, but soon, grateful patients elevated him to near godlike status. His posthumous fame kicked off a line of influencer doctors that persists today. Part healer, part icon, 100% aspirational content. Then there's Ayurveda. In ancient India, charismatic yogis and physicians composed elaborate treatises on how to live. Don't eat after dark. Do breathe sometimes. Avoid demons. Like all good influencers, they wrapped strict discipline in soothing aesthetics. Think lots of serene lotus positions and ethereal chanting, while cultivating communities to spread their approach. The Atharva Veda, a text from around 1200 BCE, is basically the world's oldest wellness blog. Here's the best route for heartburn. Now smash like and subscribe. By the time Confucius hit the scene in 5th century BCE China, wellness was as much philosophy as physical fitness. Confucius dished out advice about everything from eating in moderation to the importance of a daily moral inventory. Virtue goals. His sayings turned into the fortune cookies of their era. Only instead of offering lucky numbers, they served up reminders to stay humble and floss your character. And let's not overlook the Taoists chipping in their own guidance. Align with the Tao, munch some mystery herbs, and spend a suspicious amount of time doing slow-motion martial arts by misty mountain streams. You just know they'd have sponsored tea brands. Ancient Greece took things to another level with their cult of trainers, philosophers, and those legendary gymnasiums, which were basically the original CrossFit boxes, minus the leggings. Hippocrates, the OG food is medicine hype man, famously proclaimed, "Walking is man's best medicine." He penned, or at least dictated, detailed lifestyle tips. Lots of stretching, moderate wine, and perhaps fewer curses from angry gods. Today, his oath remains a viral meme among doctors. First, do no harm. Second, eat your vegetables. Of course, it wasn't just lone gurus. Ancient wellness movements traveled with a posse, from shamans to apprentices to eager acolytes ready to spread the brand. These early wellness scenes were surprisingly interactive. Rituals, retreats, often called pilgrimages, or vision quests, and group cleanses. If you were lucky, you'd pick up not just spiritual insight, but maybe some souvenir beads or aromatherapeutic ointment. In the end, ancient wellness influencers work their magic by weaving together personal charisma, vaguely scientific jargon, and the promise of transformation. Were they always right? Absolutely not. Leech therapy, anyone. But their legacy is everywhere. The guru archetype, the lifestyle must-have. Even the in-group lingo was already in place, priming humanity for today's deluge of wellness content. So the next time a bearded stranger offers you a healing crystal or a recipe for fermented tiger root, remember, history says this is nothing new. The search for a better life and someone to lead the way has always been trending. Back to the construction site, trying not to look like a broken statue. If only your boss believed the necklace worked half as much as you pretend it does. But let's be real. Making it through a workday with a hangover is a battle of stealth, wits, and sheer willpower. It's the ultimate test of pretending everything is fine when your insides are staging a protest. Your secret weapon, the ancient art of fake composure. Step 1. Move slowly but deliberately, like a wise tortoise. Pause, squint at blueprints or your phone, as if contemplating the mysteries of reinforced concrete. In reality, you're just figuring out whether you're about to sneeze or something worse. Nothing ruins a sneaky hangover like chit-chat. so you become a master of minimal conversation. One-word answers, strategic nods, and the classic, "just got a lot on my mind today," serve you well. When the supervisor approaches with a question, unleash your trump card, the furrowed brow of concentration. It's the universal sign for "I'm deep in thought" when you're actually calculating if you have any painkillers left in your bag. Every environment has its hiding spots. On a construction site, porta potties and the shadow behind the tool shed are sacred safe zones. In an office, it's the bathroom stall or the archive room, code for sitting on old files and closing your eyes for a few precious moments. You don't even have to look busy. Just shuffle some paperwork or hum softly, as if you're troubleshooting the mysteries of last quarter's invoices. Let's not forget the classic hydration ploy. Clutch your water bottle like it's an Oscar statue. Regular sips not only keep you alive, but signal that you're taking health seriously. Bonus points if you add a slice of lemon to scream, "Look at me, thriving." Or, if challenged with a "You look tired today," respond with, "Yeah, started a new fitness routine. Early mornings, you know how it is." Now you're not hungover, you're just painfully dedicated. The biggest enemy is noise. Safeguard yourself with earplugs, headphones, or by hovering near the quietest coworker on the site. The one who never talks. Or if you're lucky enough to score a task that requires protective headphones, wear them like armor. Nobody will know whether you're listening to a motivational podcast or drowning out the drumline that's taken up residence in your skull. Pretend to be helpful, within reason. Offer to make coffee runs, but really, you're searching for the darkest, strongest cup for yourself. Volunteer to take out the trash, knowing the dumpster is the best place for a few minutes of silent reflection. If your job involves computers, declare an impending software update. Then rest your head behind your monitor, conducting system checks. Of course, your body may betray you. If you're sweating more than usual, blame it on layering too much this morning. Did your hands shake holding the nail gun? Must be the caffeine. You become a master of excuses, with a fix for every symptom, except the lingering existential dread that comes with knowing you have 3 hours left till lunch. Remember, subtlety is the name of the game. Avoid bright lights, loud voices, and especially direct eye contact. Move with purpose, but never too quickly. Whenever possible, align yourself with co-workers who are equally out of sorts. Nothing bonds a crew like mutual suffering. In the end, surviving work with a hangover isn't about being at your best. It's about being just convincing enough. Nobody's looking for a superhero on a Monday morning. They just want you upright and not breaking things. Achieve that, and you're practically Employee of the Month. Master these techniques, and one day you'll be able to look back at your broken statue phase with pride, and maybe, just maybe, a bit less of a headache next time. As you recover, you vow, never again. The cycle restarts at the next solstice festival. Some things, like regret and relapses, are timeless. So, there you are, heavy-headed and sprawled on your friend's couch, staring at a half-empty bottle of electrolyte water and the crumpled evidence of last night's bad decisions. You run through the reel of memories, wincing at the fragments, karaoke bravado, unsolicited philosophical debates, texting your ex at 2 a.m. The details are hazy, but the shame has a crisp, merciless edge. Hangovers are supposed to be nature's built-in consequence system, a stern teacher, a bodily nudge in the ribs. Let's not do that again. In the stillness after the revelry, your inner narrator gets to work. A sense of clarity, however ephemeral, settles in. Suddenly, every glass clink and reckless toast is re-evaluated under a microscope. What was I thinking? The familiar cocktail of regret and resolve washes over you, and your mind sets to work crafting promises. You're convinced you'll morph into a model of temperance from here on. But here's the maddening truth. Reflection in the glow of a pounding headache is rarely as transformative as it feels. At best, you'll Google liver detox recipes with half-hearted sincerity. At worst, you'll develop a temporary sandpaper aversion to the word shots. Yet, for a fleeting window, you do learn. You learn that your limit is embarrassingly lower than you claim. You learn which friends are reliable bursts of water and empathy, and which disappear as soon as you start slow dancing with the potted plant. You learn the value of greasy breakfast food. If only regret had a longer shelf life. Because among the pile of promises and introspective declarations, there's the inconvenient fact that humans are gloriously bad at learning from their mistakes, especially when the lessons are shrouded in good memories. The recollection of embarrassment recedes, replaced by stories that get spun into party legends. The wrong text becomes a meme among friends. The missed train is just another anecdote for brunch. All the while, the hangover's wisdom, so vivid in the moment, begins to fade. By the time the next invite rolls around, the warnings of the morning after become background noise. Optimism, buoyed by the selective amnesia built into the human psyche, steps in. This time will be different. This time you'll pace yourself, mix in water, say no to the third round. You might even believe it. Still, there's progress of a kind. Maybe you do drink a little slower next time, or you remember to eat something before arriving. Each hangover is a clumsy tutor, and with enough repetition, even the most stubborn students catch on, eventually. The real achievement isn't perfection, but a gradual, sometimes comically slow, shift towards self-awareness. Is it possible to truly learn from the pain of excess? Maybe, but it often takes more than a splitting headache and a solemn vow. It takes the gentle accountability of friends, the gradual accumulation of embarrassing stories you'd rather not repeat, and, perhaps, simply getting older. The sense of myth-making, turning shameful episodes into rites of passage, doesn't negate the lesson. It just delivers it wrapped in humor and shared experience. So, as you fumble for your phone, scrolling through apology texts and filtered photos, remember, the act of reflecting, even imperfectly, is a mark of growth. The hangover, unpleasant as it is, becomes just another chapter in the messily written biography of your adulthood. And while you're likely to backslide, many times in fact, it's the combination of regret, laughter, and tiny adjustments that moves you, incrementally, forward. The cycle may restart, but you'll bring a little more hard-won wisdom with you each time. Turns out, your anti-hangover necklace might just become a treasured family relic. Great-granddad's magic stone. Cured nothing, but looked fabulous. If you think about it, there's an odd magic to the objects we preserve and pass down. Some families have lockets with sepia-tone photos. Others possess timepieces that haven't worked since the moon landing. And, if trends endure, maybe yours will ceremoniously unveil a time-worn hangover cure pendant. Its powers unproven, its story legendary. The real enchantment here isn't in its purported ability to neutralize last night's tequila shots, but in the web of family tales, jokes, and eyebrow-raising anecdotes that cling to it with every passing year. See, while ancient amulets were carved with mystic runes and guarded as talismans against evil spirits, the modern anti-hangover necklace might protect you only from the fashion police or a rough Sunday morning. Yet, when these objects survive beyond their fleeting moment in the limelight, they gain new significance. Maybe your kids someday will dig out that necklace, ask what it is, and you'll launch into your best back in my day monologue, equal parts cautionary tale and stand-up comedy. Reluctant heirs may roll their eyes, but they'll listen, memorize the story, and, eventually, retell it with their own embellishments. Now, the amulet becomes less a medical marvel, more a vessel for stories and laughter. Heirlooms of this kind, the "what the heck is this?" drawer variety, represent a particular strain of familial storytelling. It's less about gold and gemstones, more about sentiment, satire, and shared delusion. Perhaps the stone was gifted at a wedding, or purchased during a disastrous trip where nobody got any sleep. Solution: amulet. Suddenly, that humble necklace is a time capsule for family history, both the noble and the absurd. What separates these oddball relics from their serious, silver-polished cousins is their unashamed imperfection. They remind future generations that their ancestors were not stoic marble statues, but fallible humans with hangovers, questionable fashion sense, and a susceptibility to persuasive marketing. Your great-grandkids may never be impressed by the necklace's mystical claims, but they'll remember the twinkle in your eye as you spun its legend. The value, not monetary, nor even practical, but emotional. A reminder that sometimes the best heirlooms are the ones that come with a punchline. Who knows? In 100 years, your miracle amulet might enjoy a renaissance as vintage, kitsch, displayed proudly next to the first iPhone and a battered copy of Hangover Cures for Dummies. Scholars, perhaps in a podcast, or whatever media has replaced podcasts, might speculate on why people were so desperate for quick fixes, and why, in the end, it was the story, not the stone, that endured. In the end, passing down the anti-hangover amulet isn't about bequeathing a cure, but bequeathing a sense of humour, skepticism, and shared humanity. Perhaps the best family heirlooms are the ones that ask not to be believed, but to be enjoyed. A wink from one generation to the next. And if, against all odds, it actually does cure a hangover, now there's a family secret worth keeping. If you'd like this section to be further tailored or refined in any way, such as including a signature metaphor, specific comedic beats, or referencing cultural trends, let me know. Modern studies suggest it's all in your head, but who cares? It's the placebo that keeps on giving, and sometimes that's all anyone really wanted anyway. In the winding back alleys of ancient history, our ancestors awoke to throbbing headaches and churning stomachs just like we do today, clutching simple hopes that their hangover cures actually worked. Archaeologists and historians have gotten their hands dirty, sometimes literally, digging up recipes, treatments and ritual remedies from crumbled tablets, mummified pharmacy lists, and faded frescoes. Each clay jar and broken amulet tells a story. Most civilizations really wanted these cures to work, whether or not the science was on their side. What did the ancients actually try? Some remedies leaned towards breakfast. The Egyptians favoured cabbage, both raw and cooked, claiming it could prevent the after effects of an all-night beer session. The Greeks chewed on fried canary. The Romans, always a few steps ahead or behind the medical curve, mixed together owl eggs and wine. It's easy to laugh now, but the underlying theme is clear. Faced with the indignities of a pounding headache and existential regret, people reached for whatever was at hand, flora, fauna, or pure faith. Take, for example, the ancient Mesopotamian hangover handbooks. Archaeologists found cuneiform texts with what are considered some of the earliest known hangover cures. These prescriptions boasted mixtures of herbs, spices, and oddments such as myrrh and frankincense, often administered with a chant or two for good measure. Was it the chemical properties of the ingredients, the rhythm and repetition of ritual, or simply a bit of well-timed hope? If you ask a modern neuroscientist, spoiler alert, it's probably the ritual. The oldest medicine is the kind you believe will work. Fast forward to packed university labs and double-blind studies. Researchers have tested every hangover hack from greasy breakfasts to IV drips full of vitamins, and the overwhelming answer is disappointing. Control groups walk away feeling just as bad as those who ate pickled sheep's eyeballs. But the odd truth is, both groups report some relief, especially when they've been told in convincing tones, "This cure will fix you right up." It's the placebo effect in action, as powerful and persistent as ancient mythology itself. It's tempting, as we peer back through dusty museum glass at these curious cures, to scoff at their naivete. But hangover remedies didn't just try to address dehydration or electrolyte loss. Often, they were embedded in community rituals, festive breakfasts, or religious rites. In that way, the real remedy was a sense of renewal, a socially sanctioned return to normal. It was a morning-after ritual of self-care, legitimized by tradition, which maybe did as much for the mind as any potion could do for the body. That's why, when you're rolling your eyes at the latest internet cure or shaking your head at some influencer's miracle supplement, spare a thought for the ancients. Their hangover treatments probably didn't do a thing for acetaldehyde buildup in the liver, but they did offer a measure of hope, a communal moment at the breakfast table, and a story to share, a symbolic end to the old night and a chance to face the new day on slightly steadier feet. So, did it really work? Science says probably not, but the stories persist, and so does the hope. Across millennia, we haven't changed much. The real archaeology of ancient hangovers isn't in the residue on a broken cup, but in the enduring human need to feel like we're doing something, anything, to make ourselves whole again. And sometimes, believing you're recovering is as good as actually doing it. The placebo is the cure that time just can't shake. From purple stones to Pedialyte, humans refuse to learn. We still chase magical remedies for self-inflicted woes. It's tradition, and honestly, that's comforting. This relentless search for easy fixes is practically a genetic compulsion. For thousands of years, we've stumbled out of bed. Ancient straw mats, opulent Roman lounges, grotty medieval palates, cradling sore heads and nursing bad decisions. The circumstances change, but the impulse is the same. There must be something out there to make this suffering stop, preferably immediately, and preferably without any lessons learned. No one woke up in 500 BC, remembered the previous night's ale festival, and sprang into action to invent moderation. No, they went hunting for whatever priest, potion, or enchanted object promised to turn regret into relief. No questions asked. Why do we do this, generation after generation? Partly, it's because feeling wretched is a uniquely persuasive motivator. Pain commands attention. Enter the magic cure. Every society, no matter how advanced or dismal, promises a way out. Egyptians had amethyst necklaces, herbal poultices, and sacred prayers to ward off the wrath of a hangover god. Victorians swore by patent elixirs bubbling with opium and promises. Today, we scroll IG reels and TikToks promising homemade remedies, science-backed hacks, and the immortal myth of the morning after pill for regret. It's ancient behavior via modern memes. There's something universal, even tender, in our failure to learn. Despite overwhelming evidence and a long history telling us there are no shortcuts, we keep inventing new ones. Partly, this is optimism in disguise. Every generation believes they're smarter than the last, that surely regular folks in the past were gullible. How could anyone fall for snake oil or believe in the healing power of carved stone? But at 6:45 a.m., wrapped in self-pity and stale party confetti, the allure of anything resembling hope is irresistible. If you think we're any more rational, just watch the sales chart for detox teas every January. And honestly, it's not all bad. There is something oddly comforting in knowing you are part of a timeless quest. When you Google fastest hangover cure, you're echoing the same desperate plea as someone scraping molasses off a Sumerian temple wall. We join an unbroken, hopelessly optimistic chain. The sacred order of people who want to skip the hard part and go straight back to feeling okay. Of course, the real magic cure is boring: time, water, sleep, and a little humility. But human beings hate that answer. Our brains crave stories, symbols, and ceremonies, rituals that make suffering feel manageable. The truth is, even soulless, pharmaceutical pain relief has a whiff of the old magic about it. Take one. Wait. Believe. It's ritual disguised as reason. Regret, it turns out, is a fundamentally human problem, and our solution, creative denial, isn't going anywhere. We tell ourselves, never again, as we click add to cart on whatever the latest science or pseudoscience suggests. The products change, the promises sound more clinical, but the hope is always the same. So, as you drift off tonight in a world blessed with ibuprofen, indoor plumbing, and a total lack of crocodile jugs, give a little nod to your ancient Egyptian alter ego. They walked through the valley of the shadow of poor decisions, armed with nothing but amethyst and optimism. Sure, they believed in some truly wild cures, but who can blame them? Sleep well, grateful that you can nurse your modern regrets with cold water and comfy pajamas. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that humans have always partied too much, suffered the consequences, and then devoted alarming amounts of time and creativity to not feeling terrible the next day. Tomorrow is another day, and at least you don't have to face it wearing a necklace that probably smelled like camel. Good night, and may your sleep be as restful as a pharaoh's, minus the bad decisions. So, as you drift off tonight in a world blessed with ibuprofen, indoor plumbing, and a total lack of crocodile jugs, give a little nod to your ancient Egyptian alter ego. They walked through the valley of the shadow of poor decisions, armed with nothing but amethyst and optimism. Sure, they believed in some truly wild cures, but who can blame them? Sleep well, grateful that you can nurse your modern regrets with cold water and comfy pajamas. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that humans have always partied too much, suffered the consequences, and then devoted alarming amounts of time and creativity to not feeling terrible the next day. Tomorrow is another day, and at least you don't have to face it wearing a necklace that probably smelled like camel. Good night, and may your sleep be as restful as a pharaoh's, minus the bad decisions.